This is the Fear and Greed Saturday edition, a look at some of the most memorable stories of the week. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Looking forward to this week.
Yeah, big week, dominated really by one story, and because of course our Saturday show is all about each of us nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week. We also look at the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. But as far as the biggest story, there really is only one candidate, isn't there?
Yeah, very much. The tragedy that's unfolding in Ukraine at the moment, Vladimir Putin's ambition to reclaim the old USSR seems to have no bounds, and it will lead to enormous bloodshed, no doubt about it. If you want to understand why he's doing it, go back to Peter Hartch's interview with the Fear and Greed team from last week. It just gives great perspective on what's going on. Now, potentially this is the biggest conflict since World War II. Russia is attacking the Ukraine from three fronts: via the northern border with Belarus, across its eastern frontier with Russia, and from the south through Crimea. It started with air and missile attacks, and then the tanks rolled in. World leaders obviously have condemned the attack, including Australia's Scott Morrison, and imposed increasingly harsh sanctions. But no one is jumping in with large chunks of military or money, let alone personnel. Obviously, this is a story that is changing hour by hour, quite literally, and obviously the biggest story of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at the flow-on effects to financial markets and everything from oil prices to gold prices, and this is going to have very significant impacts on the rest of the world for quite some time to come. So I completely agree. The biggest story of the week. Shall we move on to most remarkable, Sean?
Yes, we should.
I might go first on this one, if that's all right, because in a week of big, remarkable stories, I thought this one was a standout. Rio Tinto posting the biggest profit in Australian corporate history, nearly $30 billion. The company also set another record, paying out $23 billion in final and special dividends. Talk about happy investors, because when you put all the dividends together for the year, it's a yield of close to 10%. You're not going to get that leaving your money in the bank, nowhere near. Couple of reasons for the bumper result, Sean. Really, it's been huge demand for iron ore and high prices. And Sean, I know you were at pains through the week to point out that BHP technically had a bigger profit in US dollars back in 2011, but this is the biggest in Australian dollars. So I think that makes it a pretty remarkable story.
I'd have to agree with you. I have a good contender. I'm not sure that it's quite as good as that story, like the biggest corporate profit ever and the largest dividend payout ever. I'll have a go, though.
Okay.
Mine's Mike Cannon-Brookes and Brookfield Asset Management offering to buy AGL Energy. Part of the bid is to shut down the company's coal-fired power stations earlier than planned. The bid is worth around $11 billion, including debt. About $5 billion of that is cash. AGL has a market cap of around $4.8 billion, so it wasn't much of a premium. Its share price, of course, has been hammered over the past couple of years as well. AGL boards rejected the bid, and its CEO Graham Hunt really ridiculed it. The federal government also weighed in, saying that they might want to intervene. The big issue for the government and for consumers is what this means for retail prices and also reliability if the coal-fired power stations are shut earlier. Now, Mr. Cannon-Brookes said the consortium would keep talking to AGL, and he added that the group had a $20 billion war chest to invest in renewables. The consortium wants to accelerate AGL's ambition to be carbon neutral by 2047. They want to do that about 10 years earlier. Now, Brookfield already has several investments in renewable power in Australia, and of course, it invests in the local energy infrastructure market as well. Remarkable, really, that a private individual has that much wealth to attack a major energy player, but let's put that aside for a moment. This story really ups the ante in the greenification of the electricity market in Australia. It changes the playing field. And I suspect this deal, maybe not this deal, but a deal with AGL will be done at some point in the next couple of months, changing the whole landscape of energy in Australia. Remarkable.
Yeah, Sean, that is a pretty big story, and you do kind of wonder whether that was part of the goal, just to get people talking about it and put some pressure on other players to help speed up the process of making these big energy players greener. But look, I think it's a remarkable story. I do think Rio's profit is probably a slightly more remarkable story, but I'll give you an honourable mention.
Generous.
We will be back in a moment with the sleeper story of the week. Okay, Sean, we're looking for the sleeper story of the week. So the story that's probably not quite getting the attention that you think it deserves. What was it for you?
It's just how much inflation is flowing through the Australian economy, with the Russian invasion dominating the week and the AGL bid, the Rio result grabbing the business news headlines. Earnings season this week at least has been somewhat hidden, but company after company in manufacturing, in food preparation, in financial services, in hospitality, in technology, in medical, across the board are reporting higher input costs for staff, for raw materials, for transport, all sorts of things. The official numbers show a jump in prices. That's the official Bureau of Statistics numbers show a jump in prices. But this week demonstrated how the real world, that's all those millions of businesses across the country, are struggling with higher prices. That has not been given anywhere near the attention it deserves. That's why it's the sleeper story of the week for mine.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because when you think about inflation is just such a broad term. Particularly if you're not really into economics, it tends to kind of roll off you a little bit. But this is a really kind of vivid illustration of just the impact of inflation on businesses and then the flow-on effect to consumers. So I agree, it's a big story, that one. But the sleeper story for me this week is all about super funds.
Oh, Sean, Michael, you love talking about super funds.
I love talking about super funds. I don't know why. It's probably a little bit unusual. I'm in my 30s and I love talking about superannuation. It's probably just because
It's the money.
There is so much money. There is so much money in superannuation.
Yep.
The superannuation guarantee last year, so the minimum being paid into super by your employer, went up from 9.5% to 10%. As a result, super funds are now awash with cash, and it's just going to keep rising. Take Australian Super, for example, Australia's biggest industry super fund. Last year, net cash inflow of $16 billion. This year, they're looking at up to $23 billion. Huge sums. And all that money has to go somewhere, and usually somewhere pretty safe, because after all, it's our money that they're investing on our behalf. And that's why we're seeing super funds being such active players in buying up infrastructure assets, things like Sydney Airport. But what they're talking about now, and this is why it's a sleeper story for me, is super funds getting involved in lending money to big business, the kind of corporate credit that companies are usually going overseas to find. That could actually start coming from local super funds. It's a bit of a sleeper because the amount of money that super funds have to play with is going to keep rising. And so they might have to get a little bit creative in finding new, safe ways to invest it. So let's just watch and see what they come up with. I think it's a fascinating space.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I agree it's a sleeper story because people aren't talking about it. But in a decade's time, super funds will be lending massive billions or tens of billions of dollars to big companies in Australia, no doubt.
Yeah, and we'll just look back on this day, the 26th of February,
Michael
and
Thompson,
say,
you called it.
Michael Thompson picked this as a sleeper story, one to watch. What a genius. Sean, can I give you my favourite story of the week?
Yes, please.
Moving on from super funds, it is not my favourite story. This one is, Australia is going to spend $800 million on new drones, new helicopters and other vehicles and things to help boost its claim, or really protect its claim to parts of Antarctica. So Australia claims 42% of Antarctica, really just kind of exploration rights, things like that. But China is starting to expand its presence there. So the money and the surveillance drones and autonomous vehicles are going to help with climate research, environmental management, but also exploration. And this is the part that I really love, because the Prime Minister says it will enable us to explore areas of East Antarctica's inland that no country has ever been able to reach before. I just think that's really cool that we're in 2022 and we're still talking about exploring parts of our own planet. Isn't that great?
It kind of is. Like when you were talking about that story, then part of me, the exploration part, I love the idea that there's part of the planet that's untouched.
Yeah,
maybe we
absolutely.
Just let it go.
Yeah, and just think about billionaires that are spending money trying to get into space and talking about exploring other worlds. We haven't even finished here yet. What was your favourite story of the week, Sean?
Look, I can't go past the cargo vessel that caught fire off the coast of Portugal. Basically, it was carrying thousands of cars, including a bunch of electric vehicles. Now, the batteries in the electric vehicles set off a major blaze, which was still smouldering 9 days later. So as we speak, it's still smouldering. Bloomberg reported the ship was carrying about 4,000 Volkswagen vehicles. That will cost the automaker about $155 million. There were Porsches, Audis, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, about $400 million worth of vehicles sitting on a boat that no one could get to. The boat was on fire, and indeed the cars will be burnt out. It will be a write-off. It will cost $400 million. What a cracking story. I think it's hilarious. Maybe not if you're waiting for a Porsche.
No. If you're just sitting there waiting for your Audi or your Bentley or your Lamborghini to arrive, you're probably not going to be thinking, yeah, this is my favourite story of the week. But Sean, for you and for me, it is a pretty good one.
I agree.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
And don't forget that tomorrow we'll both be back with Adam Lang from the Fear and Greed team to have a bit of a lighter look at some of the news around the place. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a good Saturday and a great weekend.